What's up, everybody? Etchy here from Dead Draw Gaming, bringing you a different type of video than normal. This one's going to be me just going over 5 interesting City League lists that I've been looking at lately. These are all lists I've gotten first at a City League recently. For those who don't know what a City League is, they are basically just small tournaments in Japan, run out of local shops. They have a cap of typically 64 people, and they're all best of one, so there's a lot of variance, a lot of randomness, very easy for a deck to just kind of do better than it should sometimes, but there's still very useful results to look at to see trends and also observe just what kind of weird ideas are being cooked up over there. So before we get into that, with Temporal Forces dropping, you can get all the cards you need over at deaddrawgaming.com. If you're going to EUIC, we'll have some cool in-depth articles going up soon at cuttertap.com. And that we're launching a new Patreon that you can join to support the content. That'll all be in the description down below. So starting off here, we have Roaring Moon / Ancient Box / whatever you want to call this now. I guess Roaring Moon is the most accurate title, but it is a far cry from what we've seen with Roaring Moon lists previously. And the reason why I want to bring up this list specifically is because the topic and this idea of a list was brought up on the recent DDG podcast by Nick Moffat. Nick was basically saying he didn't like a lot of the Ancient Box lists because he thought the Crydon sucked, he thought the Fluttermane sucked, and that you can probably get something good going with just the baby Roaring Moon and the Roaring Moon EX, with the Roaring Moon just kind of two-shotting everything, and then you have the EX one to just do big one-shots towards the end or whenever you need to. And then ideally, with the way you built your list, you could do up to 220 towards the end of the game with the baby Roaring Moon. And this list kind of popped up like 2 days after Nick was talking about it. I'm not saying Nick came up with this or anything. It just kind of happened coincidentally. It's pretty interesting in a lot of ways. It is pretty reminiscent of the previous format Roaring Moon EX list. It's got the Mew EX, it's got the Squawkabilly, cuts out a lot of the Ancient Box kind of fluff. There's no Explorer's Guidance in this list, which is probably the most interesting exclusion, and it has a one of Temple of Sinnoh to deal with Mist Energy. So other than that, this kind of just is a big tanky deck where you're just kind of trying to trade 2 shots or just blow things up with Roaring Moon EX. You do have the 3 energy boosters, Ancient Booster Energy Capsules. That's what they're called. The future ones are called boosters. And it does play pretty similarly to the current Roaring Moon list, except you just have that 140 HP monster that can go up to 200 HP monster. Really, the biggest problem with this list is it's really hard to get ancient cards in your discard early enough for that Vengeful Fletching attack to really get up to decent damage, which is normally okay in some matchups, but some matchups is kind of a problem when you're trying to effectively 2-shot like a Charizard EX. It's kind of hard to hit the 160 damage, or approximately 160. You could do like 150 and then 180 another turn or whatever. And you do cap out really low with this version of the list because you don't have those Fluttermanes, you don't have the Crydons or whatever. This list also kind of struggles with Iron Hands if you don't just find your energy boosters, energy capsules fast enough. And it is kind of hard to find those because you don't have the one of Town Store. I do like the general idea of this list. I actually tested this one the most out of these 5 lists here, but I think some things probably have to be tweaked a bit. Like I think some Explorer's Guidance is still probably good. I think either a 4th capsule or a Town Store is probably a good idea as well. One thing to note too that I think is really interesting is that one of the justifications for having Fluttermane in the first place, given in the recent podcast, was that it's just a 1 retreat Pokemon that's really easy to get in and out of the active. And so the way this list kind of dealt with the pivoting issue with Dark Patches, because Dark Patches can only go on your bench Pokemon, is just by throwing in 4 switch cards, which also inadvertently helps with some of your Lost Box matchup stuff or anything that kind of spreads damage. And it feels okay. I definitely think it's still probably overkill, and there's still probably some better uses for the switch cards, especially because you already have the Mew EX. If you just have like another pivoter, maybe that suffices and you can cut down that count a little bit. But overall, I like this list and this idea a lot. Definitely could be refined and can probably be pretty good, honestly. But Crydon, I think, kind of necessary for dealing with hands more effectively. But if you're just not expecting a lot of hands, then I think this deck is pretty good. And the reason why I'm bringing up the hands too, probably should mention, is that if you're not finding the energy capsules, they can just arm press. And your only way to deal with an Iron Hands is with a Frenzy Gouging, which is not good, or you're 2-shotting them. And if you're 2-shotting them, you're giving them more time to get your Radiant Greninja into active and then amp you very much. Or if you Frenzy Gouge it and they can just recycle the hands and then amp the Roaring Moon, you're also in big trouble. And anything that plays Iron Hands, you basically can't play the Squawkabilly EX, otherwise you just lose, because they will eventually get it, and then you lose the prize race horrifically at that point. So yeah, I had the most to say about this because I think it's just an interesting idea and it's the one I've tested the most. So going on to number 4 is Arceus Gudra, but it's also Arceus Vulpix, and it's also Arceus Noivern EX. This is a really interesting list for a lot of reasons. So Arceus Gudra, not a super new idea by any means. My very first regional I attended, Arc Gudra won that event. That was like Salt Lake City 2022, but not the first one as the second one. Archus Vulpix is also not like a new idea. It is something that has popped up in previous formats as well. The idea is you kind of just cover yourself for multiple different matchups. The Vulpix just not taking any damage from anything with ability, also having the built-in kind of shred, and then Gudra just being an unstoppable tank when you combine it with the Miss Energy is pretty effective. But this list also throws in the Noivern EX, which has actually been picking up popularity in Japan right now. Some Lugia lists have been playing Noivern EX as well, and then this list has cut down. For these Art Gudra lists that I've seen, you usually see like only the Gudra, or you see like 2-2 Gudra and then 2-2 Vulpix. This list split the 2-2 Vulpix into the Noivern EX stuff. Noivern EX has a pretty interesting attack that you can use without needing different energy types. It just uses the first attack called Covert Flight, which is pretty useful to prevent basic Pokemon from hitting you. It can create some easy win conditions, especially when you combine it with the Mist Energy, just creating some ways to kind of checkmate your opponent and prevent them from doing anything. Obviously very powerful into things that, like Lost Box, things that only run basic attackers, like that Roaring Moon list we just saw. If you're blocking them with the Mist Energy and they don't have the Temple of Sinnoh ready, then they can just kind of keep attacking you and just eventually win the game. Really, my problem with this list is just, and Art Gudra in general right now in this format, and trust me, I'm a big Gudra fan. I love Art Gudra. I'm not the biggest hater of it in the world, but I am kind of a hater of it in this format, is that it's just hard to get into those like checkmate scenarios and board states fast enough with the way some of these decks kind of play against it. And I feel like you just kind of have to draw too well to get into like your ideal board state of whether it's like Vulpix only with like a Mist Energy or something, or Gudra or Noivern EX only, especially when you're doing like 1-1 Noivern and 1-1 Vulpix. Like when you do those stage 1 Pokemon as one-offs, it's so easy for just like prize one of the pieces and you just completely lose out on that line, and you might just lose out on that line on the matchup where you actually care about it. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. The other thing too that kind of scares me is the dominance of Prime Catcher and also Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle, I've been playing a lot of Lost Box. I think I talked about it on the recent tabletop video with Edwin, but I've been primarily testing and practicing Lost Box. I think Iron Bundle kind of ruins a lot of your plans with this unless you can get down to that single Pokemon board state, which is easier said than done. And with how easy it is to get Bundle and just always gust around your Pokemon, and also Prime Catcher just being an item, just super easy to bust out whenever, it is pretty easy to neutralize like the Rolling Iron damage reduction or the Alolan Vulpix effect or the Noivern EX effect. So I like the idea of it. I think if you can get into it consistently, it's amazing and super strong, but I think probably not great to just split up into this many different attackers. But I do think Art Gudra is probably a force to be reckoned with for sure. Going on to list number 3. This is Lost Zone Raging Bolt / Lost Box with Ancient Pokemon, Ancient Box, but Ancient Lost Box. I don't know what you want to call this list. This list is super interesting to me for a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm a big Amazing Rare Rayquaza Lost Box fan. That was one of the decks I played a lot. When was that? 2023. Yeah, early 2023 before rotation. I was playing that list all the time. Love it to death, and Raging Bolt is the bigger, badder version of Amazing Rare Rayquaza. Scarier thing is the fact that it is a 2-prizer, but for every energy card attached to it, every basic energy card, it does 70 damage. And it's important to note too, unlike Amazing Rare Rayquaza, Raging Bolt doesn't care about the type of energies attached. Rayquaza basically did damage for each type of energy. This one just cares about each energy card. So if I have 5 fighting energies attached, I can use those to do a bunch of damage as long as I have the lightning for the actual attack requirement. So you have that huge endgame damage explosion potential with Raging Bolt, or even big game, honestly. You have the Fluttermane to help you out with Mirror and other random matchups where 90 damage is good. You have the Slitherwing, which is one of the most effective single prizer Iron Hands answers, except it doesn't really answer Turbo Iron Hands when they actually have ways to boost its damage, but it's still surprisingly decent. And it's an ancient Pokemon, which feeds into the next point I'm about to mention, but it can deal with hands, so it is an option against Lost Box specifically. And then the most kind of interesting thing to point out is kind of the way this list is built. If you didn't notice, there's no Buddy Poffin in this list, so they're not, exploding with 3 Comfey turn 1 or turn 2 or any point in the game, really. They just have the 4 Nest Balls, and that's it. So this deck is going to play kind of a slower game in the sense that it's not going to try to get a bunch of Pokemon in the or a bunch of cards in the Lost Zone as fast as possible in order to activate those Mirage Gates. It has the option of Sada's Vitality. It has 4 of the Sada's Vitality instead of those Buddy Buddy Poffins, and the 4 Chorus as normal. So on some turns early game, you can just Sada's instead. You can just get a Slitherwing attacking really early. You can get a Fluttermane attacking really early. You can even get a Raging Bolt attacking really early. And you just kind of can attack with those, with the Sadas as you continue to build up your Lost Zone. And once your Lost Zone is built up enough for those Mirage Gates, then you can slam them down. You can do your Iron Hands. You can do the big damage with the Raging Bolt. Plays pretty interesting from the Solitaire hands that I've played so far. I'm not like the biggest fan of Fluttermane in general. I don't think it's great. Especially with the 3 energy cost requirement. Even with Sada, you're not busting that out ever turn 1. So the only thing you're realistically attacking with turn 1 is Slitherwing, unless you want to attack with Raging Bolt, which you probably don't want to in a lot of matchups. I will say, though, Raging Bolt having 240 HP is like disgusting and really, really good, because a lot of the things that threaten EX Pokemon right now with maximum belts can only hit for like 230 max on those early turns. Like Charizard EX can only hit for 230. Arceus with a DTE can only hit for 230. So 240 is actually pretty safe if you did want to attack with it early game, but getting damage on it kind of bad. And of course, it does have the greatest card of all time, Iron Bundle, to help you out with various random things. But yeah, it's a really interesting list. I like the idea of it. I don't know if I'd play this over regular Lost Box, but I do think it can definitely pose a threat to a lot of different decks right now. This next list is kind of a heater. We got Matang Diga / Basculegion / Sandshrew. Oh my goodness, this deck is it's exciting. It is very interesting, and there's a lot of cool decisions that they made with this deck list. I actually took me a while to kind of parse through everything that they were going for with this list. It is very explosive. As long as you don't whiff, you can actually get some pretty disgusting plays off really early and really fast. But general idea, for those who don't know, Dialga V-Star, you can use its Star Cronus attack to take an extra turn, kind of like Yoga Loop stuff if you're familiar with that. The downside is your V-Star power of your V-Star attack. It does require 5 whole energy, which is a lot of energy. But the way you get around that is with the new Matang. Matang lets you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and then if you see any metal energy there, you can just attach it to your Pokemon any way you like, and then you shuffle the rest back into your deck. That's not limited to like once per turn, like overall. If you have 3 Matangs out, you can do it 3 times. So the way this deck is basically trying to work is just explode onto the field turn 1 with Basculin and your Buddy Buddy Poffins to get as many Beldums out and Dialga out as well. On your next turn, use that Matang ability as much as possible and try to get out some strong attacks quickly with the Dialga. And you don't really need that many Beldums as well out. You only need a couple to at least like get a Metal Blast off with the Dialga V-Star. Because if you didn't notice, this deck also runs 4 Professor Turo scenario, which is ridiculous. And if you're wondering why that is, basically the idea is like, if you have Matang and a Beldum, you can use the Matang ability, Turo, pick up the Matang, bench the Beldum from that you just picked up, put the Matang down on the other Beldum, do the ability again, and it lets you just kind of more efficiently use your bench space and just spam that ability out as much as possible and get a lot of damage down. And it's important to note too with the metal burst, metal shot attack from the Dialga V-Star, it does more damage with the more metal energy you have on it, so there is incentive to do it beyond 5 metal energy. It's also important to note that they have the Basculegion, which attack lets you just recycle a bunch of your energy. So if you have like 10 metal energy in the discard, you can use that upstream Spirit's attack. It shovels them all back into your deck, and then it does 200 damage, 20 times per energy. And that's an interesting thing with the Sandshrew. So the Sandshrew is a card that came out with 151, and it's not seen play at all. But it basically just prevents your opponent from using trainer cards or prevents your opponent from recycling trainer cards from their discard pile to their deck using item or supporters. So this really is only relevant for like decks that use one of those combos to like to prevent deck outs, like Snorlax Stall using Team Yelchi or Palpad, Silene, all that stuff. So you wouldn't be able to use that if you have the Sandshrew down. So I'm assuming that's the main use case for this Sandshrew. If there's other ones, please let me know in the comments. But with the Sandshrew and the Basculegion, I guess you can never really get decked out in that way, because you can always just replenish your supplies, and you have the 4 Turos as well, so you can just, if something bad gets stuck in the active, you can just pick it up and then use the Basculegion to replenish your deck. So you probably win any kind of deck out wars, which is a really interesting idea here. And then there's also Skovet too, so if you have too many metal energies in hand, you can Skovet, put them all on the bottom. Also helps for stall stuff too, but you can put them all to your bottom, and then you shuffle the deck with whatever card, and then you can pull out your Matang abilities then. So yeah, it's a deck that I definitely want to test out more. I think now that we have more ideas of how to play it, I think this is kind of a cool starting point. Definitely might seem a little gimmicky and definitely pretty RNG heavy, but I do like the idea a lot, and it seems like a blast to play. All right, we're going into the number 1 deck now. This is a Espathra EX with a bunch of different friends. So many different Pokemon here to go over. Obviously, the Espathra, when it's in the active slot, all of your opponent's attacks require an extra energy. So super, super useful for just making your opponent's life more difficult. A lot of decks where the Pokemon that they attack with, requiring that 1 extra energy actually makes them work like way harder than they need to. So let's say like Roaring Moon is probably a great example. If we take that Roaring Moon list from earlier in the video, just requiring like an extra energy on a Roaring Moon EX to Frenzy Gouge or on a Baby Roaring Moon to just do a regular attack can kind of make the play impossible depending on how early this happens in the game. And it adds a lot of stress and pressure to your opponent's side to just draw better and really hit on all the pieces they need. Otherwise, like they might need an extra Dark Patch just to get the attack off. And it is pretty scary to deal with. Sure, you can get around it, but if you have 2 Espathras going, you can't Iron Bundle anymore to try to deal with it because they can always promote the other one. And then you're burning either Supporter or a valuable Gust card, which is scary as well. You do have the Scizor to just be a reliable attacker, depending on the amount of abilities that your opponent's playing. Super useful stage 1 Pokemon with 140 HP, which is a great number to have right now, that can just hit for big damage kind of out of nowhere and be a reliable low maintenance attacker. Really, the key thing with a lot of these Pokemon in this list is that they're all really low maintenance to attack with. Scizor and Espathra all just require 1 energy to attack. If you do the Minior attack, also just 1 energy. So you're not too stressed about your attachments per turn. The only thing you might be worried about is Espathra using your attachments there to hit certain numbers on your sideboard attack because it takes the energy counts from both you and your opponent's active Pokemon. You might need to pay attention to that. You have the super effective glasses, which is pretty nice for dealing with 1 Snorlax stall. You can use Minior with the glasses to one-shot any Snorlax, no problem. It's also important for Charizard EX for the Espathra, because if you just have 1 energy on your Espathra and they have your opponent's Charizard has the 2 energy, then you need the super effective glasses to get an easy one-shot from there, because then it'll do... It does 30 plus 30 for each energy in both of you, so 30 plus your own is 60, and then 120 from your opponent, and then times 3. Easy 360. And I'm assuming there's probably some use case for the metal too. No, none that come to mind, but there might be a use case. If you think of any, let me know as well. But I'm not sure if Scizor or super effective glasses is ever really necessary. You also have the Xatu, which lets you attach even more energy, which is, again, useful for doing more damage with the Espathra and allowing you to draw more cards as well. The Klefki is probably the other really notable inclusion, and it's something I'd like to definitely see 2 of. Again, kind of talking about the Iron Bundle dominance, especially in Lost Box. Like, 1 Klefki doesn't stop Iron Bundle. Same with 1 Fluttermane doesn't stop Iron Bundle. Really easy to get around it, no problem. And it's super, super important for a deck like this to really buy as much time as they can against Lost Box when you're trying to evolve out these 30 HP Flittles and these 50 HP Natus, because the moment Sableye comes online, if those are still sitting there, they're just getting a ton of free prize cards. So if your 1 or 2 Klefkis are just stopping Lost Box for like a turn or 2, then you're going to be in a fantastic position. You do have the TM Evo to help fix that problem as well. The nice thing with the Lost Box matchup, at least, is there's not really a turbo Lost Box as a concept, at least right now. At least that might change as the set comes out. But any sort of turbo Lost Box thing, if they could actually reliably hit 10 of the Lost Zone quickly enough, then this is incredibly dangerous to play. A lot of Lost Box lists are slower paced right now, so there is time to evolve up these Flittles and these Natus. Another thing to point out with the Xatu too is it allows you to help charge up your Mew EX really fast, so you can just Moonlight Shuriken out of nowhere, or Mew EX Burning Darkness when they're down to 1 prize and just win the game. So a lot of cool things you can do with this list, a lot of the interesting uses for the attackers. I think the only thing I mentioned, I would definitely like to see 2 Klefki if you're going to go down that route for sure. But other than that, I think this is a surprisingly cool list. I think Espathra kind of has a lot of potential for EUIC and for Orlando, especially Orlando, depending on how things shake out at EUIC, because I think Espathra kind of surprisingly effectively deals with a bunch of random things in the format, but it does have to kind of approach it in a very pointed fashion and very meta dependent as well. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. So if you have any thoughts, comments, or ideas on these lists, if you've played them at all, definitely let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see more of these videos too, let me know, because I think this is pretty cool. I already look at all these city league lists anyway, so more than happy to report my findings to you all. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.